Have you ever wondered what you would do if a single moment shattered everything you thought you knew about your life? What if a stranger's reaction to something you wore revealed a truth buried for decades? This story begins not with calm, but with a jolt, the kind of moment that steals the air from the room. A necklace glinting under restaurant lights. A billionaire freezing in place. A waitress too stunned to speak. And a secret that had been waiting 27 years to surface. Margaret Lancaster's fingers trembled as she reached toward the small silver heart resting against Jasmine's collarbone. "Where did you get this?" The words escaped her in a fragile whisper she had not used in a lifetime. Jasmine stiffened, tray balanced in one hand, eyes unsure. She had no idea that this cheap little locket, a $23 trinket, was about to rip open the past of one of America's richest women. Margaret didn't do emotions. At 72, the iron-willed CEO of Lancaster Industries was famous for her cold precision. Entire boardrooms fell silent when she entered. Her silver hair was always perfect, her designer suit immaculate, her diamond earrings heavy with old money elegance. But now tears were streaming down her face, real tears, unstoppable and disarming. Jasmine's breath caught. She had worn that necklace her entire life. It was the only thing found with her the day she was abandoned as a newborn. No family. No explanations. Just the locket and a blanket. "Ma'am, I need to take your order," she murmured, voice thin with confusion. But Margaret didn't hear her. Couldn't. The restaurant around them fell into a hush. Conversations died. Chairs stopped moving. Phones were quietly lifted to record what was unfolding. Margaret Lancaster, Manhattan's unbreakable titan, staring at a waitress like she'd seen a ghost. "Please," Margaret whispered, her voice cracking. "Please tell me where you got that necklace." Before Jasmine could answer, Robert, the manager, hurried over, posture stiff with worry. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Lancaster?" She ignored him completely. "I need to speak with her." Alone. The room stopped breathing. Margaret stood abruptly, pulled a stack of $100 bills from her purse, and dropped them on the table with shaking hands. "Keep the change." Then she turned to Jasmine, desperation raw in her voice. 5 minutes. Please. I'm begging you." Robert hesitated, then nodded tightly. 5 minutes. In the back office. And so, with every pair of eyes in the restaurant following them, the billionaire and the waitress walked away together, unaware that their lives were already changing, that the truth was already rising, and that nothing would ever be the same again. Before we go any further, if you haven't done it yet, make sure to subscribe for more stories that will move you, surprise you, and stay with you long after they're over. Now, let's continue. The office was cramped, cluttered with paperwork and reservation books stacked in tired piles. Margaret closed the door behind them and turned, hands shaking so violently she had to grip the back of a chair just to steady herself. "That necklace," she whispered. "I gave it to my daughter. 27 years ago." Jasmine felt the air leave her lungs. I don't understand." Margaret opened her purse again, this time fumbling for her phone. She swiped through photos until she stopped at one, a young woman, barely in her 20s, bright-eyed, laughing, hand resting on a heavily pregnant belly. Around her neck hung the exact same locket Jasmine wore. Her name was Caroline, Margaret said softly. "My daughter. My only child." Jasmine stared at the picture. Something inside her shifted, recognition, or maybe hope, or maybe fear so deep it scraped the bone. "What happened to her?" she asked. Margaret's voice broke. "She died giving birth. 27 years ago. Newark General Hospital. There were complications. The baby survived, but Caroline didn't." A trembling breath. "I was in Europe. By the time I returned, they told me the baby had already been adopted. A private adoption. Already finalized." She swallowed hard. "I spent years searching. Investigators. Lawyers. Every trail went cold. The walls of the small office suddenly felt too tight, too close. Jasmine sank slowly into the nearest chair, her mind spinning. You think I'm? That necklace was hers, Margaret said, tears flowing again. And the only person who should have it is her baby. Her child. My grandchild. Jasmine shook her head, fighting the rising tide of emotion. I was never adopted. I grew up in foster care. They found me abandoned in a hospital bathroom. Wrapped in a blanket. With this necklace. A sharp gasp escaped Margaret. A bathroom? At Newark General? March 15th? Jasmine nodded. Yes. March 15th. 27 years ago. Margaret pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. That's the day Caroline delivered. The day she died. The pieces began clicking into place, but the picture they formed was monstrous. Someone had stolen her. Not given her up. Not surrendered her. Stolen her. Jasmine felt tears spill down her cheeks. Why would anyone do that? Margaret's expression hardened, voice turning cold as steel. Because you were worth millions. As my sole heir, you would inherit everything. Jasmine's breath hitched. She had grown up with nothing, no family, no home, no stability. Just foster houses that treated her like a monthly check. Jobs that barely paid rent. Dreams constantly just out of reach. And all along, she had a grandmother. A family. A future. One that had been taken from her. We need proof, Jasmine said, forcing herself to breathe. A DNA test. Something undeniable. I have a lab, Margaret said immediately. They'll come to us. Right now. But Jasmine's voice cracked again. And even if it's true, how do we find who did this? The grief in Margaret's eyes shifted, slowly sharpening into something colder, darker, unbreakable. We will find them, she said quietly. And we will make them pay. Neither of them knew that someone was listening. Just outside the door. Robert. His face pale. His hands trembling. Because 27 years ago, he had been there. And he knew exactly what had happened to the baby who became Jasmine. Robert stood frozen outside the door, pulse thundering in his ears. He hadn't heard those names, Newark General, March 15th, in decades. He had spent 27 years burying that night beneath lies, new jobs, new cities. But the truth had clawed its way back to him, merciless and alive. Back then, he had been a nurse drowning in gambling debts. He owed the wrong people, people who didn't accept late payments. Then she appeared, a woman with a polished smile and eyes that never blinked, offering a way out. $50,000. Cash. All he had to do was make sure a newborn disappeared before the paperwork could catch up. He had told himself it wasn't really kidnapping. The baby would be found in a safe place. Someone kind would pick her up. She would be adopted. She would live. He repeated that lie until he believed it. But it hadn't gone the way he imagined. He left the newborn in a bathroom, wrapped in a blanket and wearing the necklace he now recognized around Jasmine's neck. He had expected someone to find her within minutes. Instead, she had been alone for hours before a janitor heard her faint cries. Robert fled the state that same night. He quit nursing, changed his address, changed his name, started over. And eventually, he convinced himself the entire thing had been a terrible but distant memory. But now that baby was standing on the other side of this door. Alive. Working in his restaurant. And her grandmother, one of the most influential women in America, was about to uncover everything. He could feel sweat forming on his temples as he backed slowly away from the office. He needed help. He needed options. But there were none left. The woman who had hired him, Victoria Ashford, had been dead for 15 years. She had taken most of her secrets with her. Except for one thing. A letter. A letter she had insisted he keep locked away just in case. A letter detailing everything, the payment, the instructions, the motive. Signed. Notarized. Names. Dates. Proof. Once, he believed that letter protected him. Now he understood it was a loaded gun pointed directly at his life. Inside the office, Jasmine and Margaret were unaware of the storm gathering outside. Margaret had already placed a call, her voice sharp and urgent. Within an hour, a private DNA team arrived at the restaurant, discreet, efficient, professional. A simple cheek swab. A few sealed envelopes. No waiting rooms. No delays. 3 hours later, preliminary results came back. 6 hours later, the final confirmation. Jasmine Torres was Jasmine Lancaster. The missing heir. The stolen grandchild. The news spread overnight, exploding across headlines and neon lights. Billionaire's missing heir found working as waitress. Stolen baby mystery solved after 27 years. DNA test confirms Lancaster's successor. But Margaret didn't care about the media circus. She cared about justice. She hired investigators, forensic accountants, legal experts, the best money could buy. She demanded hospital archives from 27 years ago. She subpoenaed bank records. She dug into employment files. Footage that should have been destroyed years earlier appeared in old backups. Every stone was turned over. Slowly, painfully, a trail emerged. A nurse on duty that night. A mysterious $50,000 deposit. Years of gambling debt. A woman who had orchestrated the entire scheme. A woman who once stood beside Margaret at board meetings. Victoria Ashford. Margaret's former business partner. Her closest friend, or so she had thought. And the person who had tried to destroy her by stealing her grandchild. Victoria's motive had been simple and chilling. With Margaret shattered by grief, distracted, vulnerable, Victoria had planned a silent takeover of Lancaster Industries. The disappearance of the heir, combined with Caroline's death, would have left Margaret broken enough to lose everything. It had almost worked. Margaret had barely functioned for months after Caroline died. The company staggered. Shares plummeted. Investors panicked. Victoria hovered like a vulture, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But Margaret didn't collapse. She clawed her way back. Rebuilt everything Victoria tried to destroy. And Victoria, the architect of so much pain, died in a car accident 15 years later, taking her secrets to the grave. At least, that's what everyone believed. But the people who helped her, they were still alive. And Margaret wanted them all. Robert panicked. He tried to run, packing a bag, grabbing his passport, racing toward the airport. But Margaret's private security reached him before he even checked in. They didn't threaten him. They didn't raise their voices. Just a firm hand, a quiet escort, a waiting car. Minutes later, he was seated across from Margaret in the back of a limousine. She looked at him with a silence more terrifying than any scream. "I want names," she said softly. "Every person who touched this. Every person who looked the other way. Every person who profited from stealing my grandchild." Robert cracked almost instantly. He confessed everything, the payment, the debt, the woman behind it all. Victoria Ashford. He told Margaret how Victoria had been siphoning money from the company, hiding millions in offshore accounts, preparing for a takeover while distracting Margaret with unimaginable grief. Margaret listened with a stillness that made him tremble. Once the flood began, more evidence poured in: embezzlement, forged documents, falsified adoption files. Victoria might have been dead, but she had accomplices. People who had cashed her checks, filed her paperwork, covered her tracks. People who were still breathing. Margaret went after them with a precision colder than steel. She wanted jail time. She wanted restitution. She wanted accountability. The district attorney hesitated at first. The crimes were ancient, evidence fragile, witnesses gone. But Margaret refused to back down. She applied pressure from every angle: legal, financial, public. The DA had no choice. The trial lasted 6 months. Robert testified in exchange for a reduced sentence, 15 years. An accountant who hid Victoria's stolen money received 12. A lawyer who falsified adoption records got 10. 3 more were convicted of conspiracy. The hospital paid a $20 million settlement for their negligence. Every single person who had known something and stayed silent watched their careers crumble. But none of it, not the convictions, not the headlines, not the settlements, could give Jasmine the childhood she lost. It couldn't undo the loneliness of foster care. It couldn't return the years stolen from her and Margaret. So Margaret turned her focus toward something else. The future. She invited Jasmine into her home, not as a replacement for Caroline, but as the family she had been searching for since that terrible day. She paid for Jasmine's education at Columbia University. She introduced her to the company gently, without pressure, giving her space to choose her own path. For the first time in her life, Jasmine had options. Real ones. And she chose something powerful. A foundation. The Caroline Lancaster Foundation, created in honor of the mother she never knew. The mission of the Caroline Lancaster Foundation was clear and fierce: protect children the system overlooked. Stop the cracks where kids disappeared. Make sure no story repeated Jasmine's. Margaret funded it with $50 million to start. Doors opened quickly. Partnerships formed. Programs launched. And within the first year, more than 300 children who were on the brink of aging out or drifting through temporary placements finally found permanent homes. By the second year, the foundation pushed through new legislation, improved newborn tracking, stricter hospital security, tighter adoption oversight. Jasmine wasn't just surviving anymore, she was reshaping the world that had once failed her. 6 months after the trial ended, Jasmine stepped onto a stage for the very first time, not as a waitress, not as a forgotten child, but as the woman leading a movement. Her voice trembled for only a moment before it steadied. My name is Jasmine Lancaster. 27 years ago, I was stolen from my family and left in a hospital bathroom. I survived through luck and through people who refused to abandon me. But surviving is not the same as being protected. The audience didn't move. They barely breathed. We can't rewrite the past, she continued, but we can build a future where no child feels unwanted and no family loses someone they should have had the chance to love. When she finished, the applause hit her like a wave, thunderous, emotional, overwhelming. But she wasn't in this for applause. She was in it for purpose. Margaret watched from the front row, tears running freely, the kind of tears she once believed she was incapable of shedding. Seeing Jasmine standing tall, powerful, radiant, it felt like witnessing a miracle stitched together from pain, luck, and fierce determination. The foundation's impact spread fast. News outlets that once treated the story like sensational gossip now ran serious features on policy reform. Politicians began studying the foundation's model. Donations poured in. Other philanthropic families took notice. Some even launched their own child protection initiatives inspired by Jasmine's work. But despite the growing fame, the moments that mattered most weren't on camera. They were private. Quiet. Human. Like the way children's faces lit up when Jasmine visited foster homes. Or the letters Margaret and Jasmine received from families reunited through the foundation. Or the nights in Margaret's penthouse where the two sat together, sorting through old photos, piecing together Caroline's life one memory at a time. She would be so proud of you, Margaret whispered one evening, voice thick with emotion. Caroline always wanted to help people. She was studying to become a doctor when she found out she was pregnant. She had such determination, such fire. Jasmine held her grandmother's hand gently. Tell me more about her. And Margaret did. She spoke about Caroline's stubbornness, her laugh, her messy attempts at cooking, her terrible handwriting, the way she danced around the living room when she was excited. She gave Jasmine the mother she never had, not physically, but emotionally, piece by piece. For the first time, Caroline became real. A person. A dream. A love Jasmine never got to meet, but now finally understood. Margaret confessed what she had kept locked inside for decades. "I wasted so many years being angry," she whispered. "After Caroline died, after you vanished. I built walls so high I couldn't feel anything. I thought shutting the world out was the only way to survive." Jasmine squeezed her hand, her voice soft. "You're not shutting anything out now." Margaret smiled, a small, tired, grateful smile. "No. You helped me tear down every wall. We're rebuilding together." The necklace, the small silver heart that began this entire journey, now rested in a glass case at the Foundation's headquarters, displayed beside Caroline's photo. Beneath it, a plaque read, "In memory of Caroline Lancaster, and in honor of every child who survives against impossible odds. May we never forget their worth." Jasmine wore a perfect replica every day, a reminder of the past that shaped her and the future she was fighting for. Robert, serving his reduced sentence in a minimum security facility, heard about the Foundation's rapid growth and Jasmine's rise. He wrote her a long letter filled with apologies, explanations, excuses, pages trying to justify the unjustifiable. Jasmine never responded. Some things could not be forgiven. Some wounds weren't meant to heal in the direction of the person who caused them. The other convicted conspirators faced their own consequences. The accountant who hid Victoria's stolen funds lost not just his freedom, but every asset he owned. The lawyer who forged the adoption paperwork was disbarred and disgraced. Others lost their licenses, reputations, careers, everything they had built on lies. But Jasmine never wasted energy thinking about them. She focused on children she could save, on families she could reunite, on the system she could transform from the inside out. When she finally completed her nursing degree, she specialized in pediatric care. Her days became a blend of tending to sick children in hospitals and directing major initiatives at the Foundation. Margaret often joked she had less stamina than her granddaughter, a woman 50 years younger. "You get that work ethic from me," Margaret would say with pride. But the compassion, all of that is Caroline. Lancaster Industries thrived under Margaret's leadership, but she slowly began transferring responsibilities to a team of trusted executives. She had spent a lifetime building an empire, now she wanted something she had never allowed herself before. Time. Time with Jasmine. Time to make up for what was stolen. Time to be a grandmother instead of a CEO. They traveled together to Paris, where Caroline had once dreamed of studying abroad. Tokyo, where Margaret had been when Caroline died, a place she had never returned to until Jasmine took her hand and insisted they rewrite that memory together. City by city, they carved new moments over old wounds. And everywhere they went, the Foundation grew. Partnerships in Europe. Pilot programs in Asia. Collaborations with hospitals across the world. What began as a reunion had become a revolution. Foster care reform swept through multiple states. Hospitals strengthened birth security protocols. Adoption regulations tightened. Background checks became mandatory nationwide. And at the center of it all was Jasmine, the stolen baby who survived, the nurse with a mission, the granddaughter who became a symbol of change. All sparked by a $23 necklace that refused to disappear. 3 years passed from the day Margaret first saw the necklace glittering around Jasmine's neck. 3 years of rebuilding a family from broken pieces. 3 years of transforming pain into power. And now, Jasmine stood once again behind a podium, but this time, she wasn't speaking. She was introducing someone. Someone extraordinary. The auditorium was full, every seat taken, every camera pointed toward the stage. The lights dimmed as Jasmine stepped forward, wearing a tailored suit Margaret had helped her choose and the replica necklace she never removed. She took a breath, smiled softly, and began. "She is the strongest person I know," Jasmine said, voice shimmering with emotion. She lost her daughter. She lost her grandchild. She survived grief that would have destroyed most people. But instead of letting pain break her, she turned it into hope. The audience leaned in. She rebuilt her life. She rebuilt our family. And she helped build a foundation that protects children across the world. She taught me that love can survive decades of silence, and that justice can take time, but it always finds its way. She looked toward the front row, where Margaret stood, hand over her heart, tears in her eyes. "It is my honor," Jasmine said, voice thick but steady, "to introduce my grandmother, Margaret Lancaster." Applause erupted like thunder. Margaret walked to the stage slowly, gracefully, the same woman who once intimidated entire boardrooms, now softened by years of healing. She paused, breathing deeply, then spoke into the microphone. "I learned something important," she began, her voice calm and resonant. "Wealth means nothing if you are alone. Power means nothing if you don't use it to protect others." The crowd fell silent. "And family," her voice wavered. "Family is everything." She turned toward Jasmine, eyes glistening. "I would give every penny I own to have those 27 years back with my granddaughter. But since I cannot rewrite the past, I will spend whatever time I have left ensuring no child, no parent, no family ever suffers what we did." The room stood as one, a standing ovation that seemed to stretch endlessly. Photographers captured the moment when Margaret opened her arms and Jasmine walked into them. A hug years overdue. A photo that would circle the world. The billionaire and the former waitress. The grandmother and the granddaughter. Two lives ripped apart by greed and stitched back together by truth. The image of their embrace appeared on news sites, magazines, television broadcasts. But the real story, the one that mattered, was deeper than headlines. It was about Caroline. About a young mother who had loved her unborn child fiercely, who had placed a necklace around her baby's neck in the final moments of her life. A symbol of connection. A beacon through darkness. A lifeline that survived 27 years of chaos. That necklace endured foster homes, moves, losses, heartbreak, and all the uncertainty Jasmine grew up with. It refused to be forgotten. It refused to disappear. And in the end, it led Margaret straight to her granddaughter on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. "Share this story," Jasmine said once during an interview, "if you believe justice can win against impossible odds. Share it if you believe love can survive decades of silence. Share it if you believe that even the smallest object can carry the weight of destiny." People shared it. Millions of them. Because Jasmine's story wasn't just about a crime. It was about endurance, resilience, hope, and the powerful truth that even when the world seems determined to break you, it takes only one moment, one person, one detail, to rewrite your entire life. Jasmine continued working between the foundation and the children's hospital, her days filled with healing, planning, advocating. Margaret continued supporting her, guiding her, loving her with the ferocity of someone who refused to lose her twice. Robert remained in prison, serving his sentence, a reminder that choices carry consequences. He watched the world move forward without him, saw Jasmine's success on television, heard about the reforms he had unwillingly helped inspire. But he also knew the truth. She would never answer his letters. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. As for the others who once hid behind victorious schemes, their names faded into cautionary tales, warnings of what happens when greed eclipses humanity. Their downfall became part of the story too, a shadow that only made Jasmine's rise shine brighter. And every day, at the heart of the Caroline Lancaster Foundation, inside a glass case warmed by soft lights, hung the original locket, the one that saved everything. Beneath it, Caroline's photograph. A mother lost too soon, but never forgotten. "Love never forgets," Margaret once said quietly as she and Jasmine stood before the display. And Jasmine believed her. Because she was living proof. The baby abandoned in a hospital bathroom. The waitress judged by customers who never looked twice. The granddaughter who found her way home because of a simple silver heart. A $23 necklace that carried the weight of generations and changed the world one second chance at a time.